Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We are here with Drew Moffitt from Kumospace.com. Now, Kumospace is a platform that provides virtual offices and event spaces where remote and hybrid teams collaborate and connect. And Drew is one of the company's earliest employees. He took it from a pre-funded product with about 100 users to having been used by several million around the world and with over $24 million in funding. So we're going to find out about all of Drew's achievements, his mindsets, and what we can pick up and learn from him. So Drew, glad to be talking to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And, that was a very good summary of my current role.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. And so, there's who you are on paper and the resume and theoretically, but what are you all about and what is your current sort of focus and passion these days?
Yeah, so I think, my career, going back to kind of the origin, is went into college in 2007, came out of college in 2011, entirely different kind of environment. I had naturally thought I'd end up in finance. I ended up in real estate, and then I ultimately finagled my way into some classes at Columbia Business School and founded two companies, had a modest exit, spent 3 years building 4 corporate-backed ventures, and then, as you described, got involved with Kumospace. I think that journey being non-linear really is how I've approached problems. And I think the thing that you always need to be doing is, while there's successes in there, especially in marketing, it's always about trying to be at the front of that spear, the tip of that spear there. And what I mean by that is you can go and read about how to do, say, cold email marketing. But if that's out on the internet, it's probably the way that a ton of people are doing it, and your engagement rates are not going to be particularly good. So you always need to think about how are you innovating? How are you evolving? How are you getting better, right? So it comes down to, for me, I wake up some mornings, I look at the numbers, I'm like, this is great, we're crushing it. I wake up another morning and maybe traffic was a little lower that day, and I'm like, questioning how could I do better? So I think that pursuit of always trying to find the next thing and always trying to innovate is really me as a person.
And that's some great energy to tap into, because there's that saying of if you look back 6 months or a year and you don't cringe, then you haven't grown enough. And so ideally your life should just be a series of these, say, 6-month periods where every of those time blocks, if you look back the past 6 months, you're like, I can't believe that I was so slow at this process, or I can't believe I hadn't figured that out. And so that way you're kind of on this ongoing journey of continuous improvement. And it also seems like there's something interesting you mentioned in there that we all need to tap into, which is kind of habitually checking the numbers, whatever those numbers are, and not being afraid of them, because there's always that kind of fear of I'm afraid to look at my website stats. I'm afraid to look at my bank account. I'm afraid to look at all these numbers, but they still exist. They're still there. And then when you look at these people that are really successful, it's first thing in the morning, they look at, okay, what's my metric? What's my goal? Where are these numbers at? So that way you kind of get maybe a thick skin, so to speak, and you kind of start the day with, okay, my singular focus is figuring out how to improve this metric. So this is great for us to think about. And so when you're on your journey, how do you navigate kind of not being in the one extreme of resting on your laurels, being lazy, but then the other extreme of being too scatterbrained, right? Being too much of chasing the next bright object? How do you kind of exist in the middle where you're always improving, but you're not kind of self-sabotaging one of these two extremes?
Yeah, I think balance is always the way to succeed. I think there's a couple things. So first thing I would say is I have spent a lot of my career centered around trying to prove a business was viable or an idea was viable. So I approach marketing very much in that same way. And it's let's try a time box. Let's try and do this thing quickly. And if we don't get some promising indication that this is working, it might just be that this is not a bad idea or a bad marketing tactic. It's just not a good fit for our product or our consumer who we're selling to, right? The way that you would do direct to consumer is always going to be different than like B2B, for example. So a direct to consumer tactic that's really good, you might say, hey, let me give that a try. And it may work for your B2B business, but it may also not. And just be willing to accept that success is both succeeding and failing. So something that I've definitely gotten better, talking about those 6 months is in the last really year now, is riding that emotional roller coaster, right? The startup world is especially a very emotional driven roller coaster. And I, spent a lot of time getting some kind of business coaching and what you could think of as like kind of professional therapy around that. And it was just like dissect, and I would recommend it for kind of anyone who wants to advance their career in a way and how they're problem solving, because you need to be able to go in there and look at the numbers, especially on a bad day. But you need to not let that necessarily like demoralize your attitude, for that day and kind of waste that day. So being able to just sort of say, all right, today's a bad day. We're going to figure this out, and, start thinking about how to move forward. Most recently, I'm not sure exactly what time this will get released at, but in the last about starting on December 6th, Google released a very violent update to their search algorithm. It was called the helpful content update. It went on for about 6 to 7 weeks of, and Google's not super transparent about what they're doing, but there was a lot of indications that they were probably engaged in A/B testing. They have a lot of concerns around things like GPT and AI-driven content, because we would watch one day our content would rank for a keyword that we really wanted to rank for. And then a day or two later, we wouldn't even be in the first 100 results, the first 10 pages of Google. So that's like a pretty emotional thing. And SEO as a B2B business has been a big focus of us recently. So we're investing a lot of resources. We had, continuously improved and built this content machine. And then all of a sudden you get this kind of unexpected wrench. Fortunately, it's over. The traffic is recovering. But going through that, we were like, all right, let's start making plans. Let's assume the worst case scenario. And we were able to make those assumptions of the worst case scenario and build a plan out of that because we were looking at that. I was looking at that data, on a daily basis.
Yeah, and you were kind of like living in it and being a part of it. And I like a couple of things what you said there. One is riding the emotional roller coaster, and that's really great because there's that thought of like, well, can I avoid it, and can I like not ride the roller coaster? And it's like, but then if you ignore those 7 weeks of Google doing its thing, I mean, then you'll be way behind. And you also mentioned something in there about how success is not 100% success. Success contains both success and failure. So don't try to avoid failure. Know that it's a part of it, and learn and grow from it and all that cool stuff. And so you've been on this journey, and you've given us a taste of kind of what maybe the stress is sometimes like, where just like you get these unexpected crises and you deal with it until the next crisis comes up. And so that's led you here. And so can you tell us about Kumospace and what it's all about and how they're unique and what's your part in it?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, very early employee at the company before our seed round of funding. And 2020, the co-founders got together and they said, let's, the Zoom, what we're doing right now is really good for one-on-one interactions. But if you're trying to have a virtual happy hour or like team building activity with a larger group, it becomes very boring for the people that aren't talking and everyone's just kind of listening. It becomes more like a webinar. So they made this product, Kumospace. It has spatial audio, and they just threw it out there in the wild. And we really had no idea what to market it. And that's how initially I got involved with Brett and Yang, the co-founders, was trying to figure out like who wants this product. And we actually had a lot of success around B2C to B marketing, just getting a lot of influencers on social media with short form video content. So like Reels, TikTok, etc. And that did really well in 2021 because most of the use case we realized was centered around like virtual events. Like people were hosting, everything from very large conferences down to just like team happy hours, religious services, weddings, all types of stuff. And as the world got back to getting together physically, we realized there was a subset of users that were working remotely, that were using our product as this always-on virtual office. So we spent much of 2022 understanding those users and building the features that they need to support. For example, like in a typical Zoom call and Kumospace, in 2021, you only need one person to ever screen share at the same time. But if you're in a virtual office with 20 people working, there's multiple screen shares happening at once. So you need to kind of add that functionality. You need to have persistent chat, right? We don't need the chat history from the Zoom call next time we get on Zoom. But if you're in that virtual workspace, you want to know the files you shared, the things you've done. And what we've really realized is that for remote and hybrid teams, the kind of three main pain points exist. And it depends on the company and the manager and leadership, but those are culture, collaboration, and visibility. And these are the same three reasons that people say we need to get back to a physical office. But like, it's 2023, we've got software. This software can, make this happen. And it's how we work. So when, I wake up in the morning and I see that the numbers are not looking particularly good, I can walk right over as soon as I see, our content marketer come in, and I can start talking to her and say, like, let's start brainstorming through this. And you don't have to play that kind of meeting Tetris to collaborate. And you start having these water cooler moments. So you start building culture with your team members. So that's the way that we use it. That's the way that, tons of teams are using our product. And if you guys, ever want to check it out, it's free. So give it a shot.
And it's really amazing to kind of get a little bit of taste of your mindset here, in that, there's as you said, there's all these other like kind of meeting tools. Like there's been meeting tools since like, almost the beginning of the internet, right? And then when you make something that's similar, then maybe the starting point, like perhaps when you came along, there was like all these extra features. And then when you think about, okay, when you want to introduce someone to this piece of software, then there's that question of like, well, why don't I just use X, right? Why don't I just use Zoom? And if you say, well, we're exactly like Zoom, but we have this one feature, or we're 10% better, then maybe the pain is not great enough to switch over from what you're currently using to something that's better. And so it seems like your thought process is to say, instead of trying to be 10% better, look at the audience, like maybe the undiscovered audience who needs our software, and look at where they're like really frustrated, where like the happy hour is just a disaster on Zoom, where they don't have the persistent chat, where the like the church services are just like, there's got to be some better tools. So instead of trying to like steal all these users or force someone to like move over just for 10% improvement, you're like, who is completely left in the dark? And so, and then you kind of mentioned something in there of, then once you introduce it to that kind of new audience of users, then see what is still missing. And then you can build in these features like directly exactly for them. And then when you go and find more of the companies needing the happy hour, so the companies needing the church services, or just more of those kind of lookalike audiences, you say, hey, we built these features for the other people like you, and this doesn't exist anywhere else. And that seems a lot more exciting for just for everyone involved. And then it's also just cool to hear about kind of your like daily mindset here, right? When you have these stats in real time, you wake up, you say, the numbers aren't where I'm at, let me go and talk to this person. And at first, it seems like the daily checking seems like so much work, but I'm thinking, kind of hearing from you talking, that the kind of the daily progress, it's simpler, right? Because you're only kind of trying to get the numbers up today, or focusing on what the tasks you can do today, and it seems less overwhelming than trying to play catch up and saying like the numbers have been down for 6 months. You're just focusing on the sort of the one day at a time.
Yeah, I think planning is a big component of it, and then breaking that into smaller pieces. So now it's the new year. At the end of last year, I did a bunch of planning ahead. And I typically will break out 2 or 3 major kind of initiatives, SEO being one of them in this quarter, in content. And that's been an ongoing initiative. And but because you're checking on that, and because I've used the example of this Google search update, you're sitting there and you're looking at it and you're saying, how can we refine our process? So, for example, because of this helpful content rollout, we're really making sure that just there's no red flags in our content from an AI perspective. And fortunately, there wasn't. We had earlier or late last year, we had actually experimented with AI generated content. I had misgivings because I was just concerned that like Google would probably not like it. And then it turned out that they had this big update coming. But now that's an enhancement to the process. When you're kind of constantly sitting there, you're thinking, okay, so what's a big time suck in this person's day? One of them is sitting there and finding images. So it's like, all right, let's use our virtual assistant offshore to do that. Because that's just a lower, it's a high time, but lower IQ kind of task. So let's ship that out to a resource that's better to do that, and have the person, leading the content effort focused on getting more content out the door. So you just start to make those kind of systematic, like incremental improvements to your process. And you look at our process back in September, where I really started scaling this process to today. All those little improvements have made it more efficient and just more collaborative. I mean, it really came out of the fact that we were being collaborative and solving that. But the process is just also a lot more collaborative. It's easy to take now someone says, hey, I want to write an article about ABC. You can just give us a short outline and we'll have this in SEO brief and we'll, put this into our process and it'll come out in a couple of weeks. So it's just always looking for those kind of incremental and sometimes you have those wins and it's really good to celebrate them. Sometimes you have those losses and you just kind of got to be like, yeah, this sucks. We're having a bad week. We're going to overcome this. So having that optimism that you're going to overcome, instilling that trust in your team and, it will get better.
And like you hear about like the Wright brothers, where they just kept on with the daily incremental improvements and said, well, maybe today we'll tackle making the tail piece bigger or smaller, or making the wings like this or like that. And then just like every day getting a little bit better. And I'm sure they had frustrating weeks like the rest of us where they just said, I know I'm hitting a wall, but I'll keep like pushing through, and I'll maybe continue the process knowing that every day won't be a down day like this. And so when you have kind of those maybe frustrating days or weeks, how do you get the energy back? Because and I'm not even really sure how to tap into this or how to ask this, but like, there's that need to like get like the manufactured excitement, right? There's like, you're talking about like SEO and Google updates, and it's really easy for it to just say, I'm so bored by this, I'd rather go and go mountain biking or something like that. But how do you tap into the enthusiasm of the otherwise boring tasks? It seems like if we can figure out the formula for that, then everything is solved, right?
I think it comes down to a couple of things. So the first one is, people hire what is their like. So being really good at hiring, and because there's no, like, the employee that fits at your company fits into your organization. So just being good at hiring for that. The product is probably one of our best recruitment tools, because we do all of our customer demos in our virtual office. We do all of our interviews in our virtual office. It helps kind of instill and show those recruits, our prospective, hires, that this is what Kumospace looks like. Here's the actual team working. NASA is actually a big user of our product for recruiting. So you recruit those kind of people. I tend to be, very much of like a workhorse. I like to solve problems. I get excitement from when I solve problems. I get frustrated when they don't, but that kind of motivates me to figure out how to solve it. And as such, much of the people on the business side of the team have that same kind of similar characteristics. So hiring would be a big piece of that, making sure that you put together a team that kind of mirrors and complements you. Then the secondary piece is like, we invest a lot into culture. And the thing about using a product like Kumospace is that when you're trying to build remote company culture and you're using something like Zoom, you're just maybe having these quarterly or monthly Zoom happy hour. And that doesn't really build company culture. It's that short interactions in a daily way, having optional kind of activities. Like we have lunches where on every Thursday, people can, get a lunch on their Brex card and they can show up and eat in one of the common areas of our virtual office. So you just start to build those kind of bonds with people, and that gets them very excited. You're also, because you're having a lot of burst conversation. Hey, I got a quick question when I go over and talk to a designer about a new page on the website. You're going to have that little water cooler moment. So you start to understand who they are as a person. So it causes everyone to get very much vested into the project and what you're working on. So I'd say it starts with hiring, and it starts in investing in culture. And that'll ultimately help motivate the team during those down moments. And, celebrate the wins in the same way is a component of culture.
And I think this all ties in with your kind of philosophy of the whole collaboration thing. And, you hear about that kind of cliched, cheesy saying of like, you are who you surround yourself with. And it's easy to just kind of take that at face value. But then you kind of digest that and you think, okay, like, why did I grow up the way that I did? And you think, well, because of the friends that you kind of fell in with. And then that shapes the person that you are. And it's not your fault that you ended up that way, but it is your fault if you let that group of friends hold you back. Or if you say, well, this group of friends is not serving me, it's time to find like better friends. And then you translate that into adulthood when you have a career or employment or entrepreneurship or, whatever kind of business making money company culture there is. And then now there's the group of people, your coworkers that you are surrounded with. And so you're saying that it's so important to have this really great team of people that are just as excited as you, who can maybe prop you up when you're not having the best moments, and vice versa. And so that way everyone can kind of be excited together. And then even if there are areas where you are not as excited or you have those weaknesses, that's why the team exists, because you have people that are more enthusiastic about the metrics or about the content, and then everyone can kind of meet and lift everyone up instead of dragging people down, or even worse, existing in a vacuum and just trying to figure it all out yourself. So this all relates very well to Kumospace and what you have going on, and just your entire journey. So as we're nearing the end of our conversation here, Drew, can you tell us what the next steps are if someone wants to know more about you or more about Kumospace? What type of person should be doing more investigating into you, and what should they be doing?
Yeah, so I'm pretty accessible. If you want, you can email me, drew@kumospace.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, if you go and you create a Kumospace account, or if you rather talk to one of our sales and support people and just you click on the website to schedule a demo, as I mentioned before, all of our demos happen in our virtual office. Like, you literally come to our virtual office and see how your company could use Kumospace, because ours is using it in that live moment. And I'm usually in that space. So if you are doing a sales demo or having a demo of the product, the team knows exactly where to find me. And, that's one way to seek me out. And, the kind of people that should be looking at our product are really managers or owners or CEOs or leadership teams that are interested in trying to understand how they can be more collaborative and have better culture at their company. Like you were mentioning, there's a lot of studies out there that show that remote workers are more productive often than in-office workers. But where that breaks down is when they have to interact outside of their own immediate circle. So while I might be very good at, like, if you're a content marketer, you're really good at writing blogs because you have no distraction in your home office. Whereas in a physical office, people may come and interact, interrupted you. But as soon as you have to do something with a larger collaborative use case, if you struggle to kind of interact with those people. So that's, one of the things that we've found has made our company a lot better at, just being higher output. So I'd recommend, checking it out.
Well, fantastic. And the place to check that out is Kumospace.com. That's kumospace.com. As Drew said, sign up, get that demo so you can see what all the fuss is about and see what is possible as far as getting that collaboration amped up, getting that company culture and that communication the best that it can be. And I mean, what do you have to lose, right? Just living the same exact existence that you are already. But if you keep doing the things you've been doing, you're going to get the same results you've always gotten. So it's time for a change. It's a time for something more exciting, which is to go to kumospace.com right now. If you're driving in the car, pull over and write it down, kumospace.com, and you're going to have a lot of fun checking out what Drew and the company and everyone there can show you as far as doing the better collaboration. So as we are wrapping up our conversation here, Drew, you're clearly someone that kind of has thought a lot about what works and what doesn't. So do you have any parting words of advice for anyone who is growing a company, doing a startup, anything along those lines? Any piece of advice that you wish you'd gotten years ago that you had to learn the hard way? Anything come to mind as far as some good advice like that?
Yeah, so I think the best lesson that I learned, unfortunately, the hard way, is really trying to fail fast. So the first company I did was a company called Forever Not. I founded that company. It took me about 9 months to get that company into market, which sounds kind of fast, but the next go around, I did it in about 60 days. And the reason was because when we got Forever Not into market, it briefly went viral. It was a relationship betting app. I kind of timed the market release pretty well right around Valentine's Day. So it got a lot of media. Then Apple decided they really didn't like the premise and they didn't want it in their app store anymore. It's a private marketplace, and they removed it. And then, that basically ended the business on the spot. So it went from sleeping on a couch to being on Good Morning America to no longer existing, all in about a 30-day period. And my takeaway from that was the next time I do this, I just want to get to market faster and prove that there's actually something to do. So when I did Tailbus, it was, idea, and 60 days later, we were making revenue. And the way to do that is often when you think about your idea, you start adding a lot of bells and whistles. But what you really want to do is just kind of remove as many of those bells and whistles from your idea. That could be a marketing idea, that could be a business, and just trying to get the basic iteration into the market. And then let the users or let the way the marketing campaign is performing indicate how you are going to make changes at that point. Going back to that Kumospace example of how kind of the product has evolved over time, we've really let the users tell us what they want out of the product and built those features. We could never have imagined all of those features back in 2020. So that would be my advice: is try and fail quickly. Try to hit those moments where you get real user feedback that are paying you or using your product and giving you feedback, or engaging or not engaging with your marketing campaign.
I love it. Fail fast, create that viable product, and let the customers kind of shape and guide where it ends up. And so the very next step for you out there in podcast land is go to kumospace.com, sign up, and see what Drew has going on. So we'll see you at kumospace.com. And thank you, Drew, for showing up and blowing our minds with all sorts of cool knowledge bombs. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.